A homeless boy used his last coins to save a pregnant woman. 10 years later. The loudest sound in the chaos of Kolkata. Louder than the screeching tram horns, the relentless cries of street vendors, or the clanging bells of rickshaws was the pounding of Kael's heart. It beat wildly in his frail chest, a rhythm of wildness, of a joy so sharp it felt almost sinful. It was the sound of a future being rewritten. In Kael's grimy palm was a leather wallet, genuine leather, the soft kind he had only ever seen behind the glass windows of luxury shops on Park Street. And inside, when he pried it open in a hidden corner, was something even harder to believe. A fat wad of rupee notes, still fresh with the scent of paper and power. With this money, Kael could afford a month without hunger. Maybe 2, if he spent it wisely. He could buy new sandals, so his bare feet wouldn't burn on the melting summer roads. A shirt without holes to cover the scars from street brawls. And most importantly, nights of sleep not interrupted by the cold sting of the stone banks of the Hooghly River. With this money, the 15-year-old boy could buy something he had never dared to dream of a beginning. A crooked smile formed on his parched lips. He licked them, tasting the salt of sweat and dust. This was real. The wallet of a careless tourist. A fat foreigner with a camera dangling from his neck, who had been too absorbed in photographing the Howrah Bridge to notice his most valuable possession slipping from his pocket. Kael didn't see it as theft. He saw it as destiny, a gift from gods he no longer believed in. He stuffed it into the waistband of his pants. The lump of leather and cash gave him a strange sense of calm. But Kolkata is a city that never sleeps and never lets anyone rest. Just 20 meters away, in an alley behind the white stone wall of Bellevue Private Hospital, a life was being weighed against the very money Kael had just hidden. And though Kael didn't know it yet, he was about to make a choice that would shape the rest of his life. He was Kael, a shard of Kolkata, a child raised by the river's stone steps, fed by muddy water and public indifference. He didn't remember his father's face. His mother had died of illness and exhaustion when he was 10, leaving behind a fading memory of warm arms and a worn-out silver locket. Life had taught him 2 unbreakable rules to survive in this brutal world. 1. Never trust anyone. Kindness always has a price. 2. Never miss a chance. It will never come again. And today, he had a golden opportunity. His plan was simple, sketched from the hungriest parts of his imagination. He would walk straight to a food stall in Newmarket, where the air smelled like curry and pans hissed with life. He'd order a plate of chicken biryani, overflowing with a boiled egg and potato. And he would eat slowly, savoring each golden grain, each tender piece of chicken, every drop of rich gravy. It would be a king's meal, a king in rags, with filthy feet. His mind wrapped around his royal feast. Kael hurried forward. Trying to blend in with the crowd, he passed an alley, ready to ignore it like he had hundreds of others. Kolkata's alleys held what the city wanted to hide. Garbage, secrets, sorrow. He had no reason to stop. But a faint sound held him back, a small broken moan, almost drowned out by the street noise, but Kael's ears, trained to hear even the drop of a coin, caught it. It was the sound of pain, of someone running out of strength. Kael stopped, frowning. Rule number 1 rang in his head. Don't get involved. It could be a drunk, an addict in withdrawal, or worse, a trap set by another gang, waiting for a curious boy like him. He turned to leave. The biryani was calling. But curiosity, or something deeper, unnamed, pulled him back. He took a few cautious steps into the shadows of a storefront and peeked into the alley. And that's when he saw a pregnant woman. He couldn't see her face, just a figure curled up on the damp ground, next to reeking trash bags. Her clothes, a silk turquoise salwar kameez once fine, now stained with mud and something darker. Her belly pushed against the fabric, swollen and hard. One hand clutched her stomach. The other gripped the earth like life itself. Her face was soaked in sweat, contorted in a pain Kael couldn't begin to imagine. Kael's survival instinct screamed, "Leave, this is trouble." Bellevue Private Hospital was right there, beyond that wall. Why was she here? In the place where people throw away what they don't need? Surely she had money. Someone would help her. It wasn't his problem. He was just a street kid. He couldn't save the world. He just needed to save himself his meal, his new beginning. He stepped back, then another step. His hand tightened unconsciously around the wallet at his back. But then the woman let out another cry, this time a name. "Rohan, Rohan, where are you?" Her voice cracked with despair. She opened her eyes. They didn't see Kael. They looked into empty space, filled with betrayal and fear. And in that fleeting moment, one that would haunt him forever, Kael didn't see a stranger. He saw a memory of his mother. He remembered her final days, lying on a torn mat, gasping just like that, with those same helpless eyes. The war inside Kael ended, not with some heroic choice, but a silent surrender to something greater than hunger, greater than self-preservation. He didn't know if it was compassion, or fear of becoming the cold-hearted person he hated most. He only knew he couldn't walk away. If he did, his royal meal would taste like ashes. He took a deep breath. The air thick with trash and damp rain. He stepped out of the shadows. He stepped into the alley. He knelt beside her, keeping a careful distance. "Ma'am, are you okay?" His voice was hoarse, unsure. It had been so long since he'd spoken a full sentence to a stranger. The woman flinched like a wounded animal. She looked at him wide. Beautiful eyes, now brimming with terror. Who are you? Stay back." "I won't hurt you," Kael said quickly. "Are you injured?" She shook her head. Tears welled up. "Water, please." "Just some water," she whispered. "My baby, it's coming." Coming? Kael froze. He knew nothing about childbirth, but he knew it couldn't happen here, not in this alley. He looked at his empty hands, then at the wallet behind his back. The king's meal, the new beginning. It all seemed to vanish in front of him, but a decision had been made. He had to do something. More than water. She needed a hospital. "Stay here," he said, his voice firmer. "Don't move. I'll come back." And before she could say a word, Kael had turned, dashing out of the alley, disappearing into the chaos of Kolkata. But this time, he wasn't running toward a meal. He was running toward a future he hadn't imagined. Kael burst from the alley like an arrow. The hunger was gone, replaced by breathless urgency. He had no plan, just a mission to help that woman. He rushed to a roadside water stall, used the last coin in his torn pocket to buy a bottle. He raced back with the bottle in hand. She was still there. Her breathing shallow. He knelt, awkwardly lifting her head, gently helping her sip. She drank in small gulps, eyes closed. But water wasn't enough. He knew that. She needed a doctor. Bellevue was right there. But its doors weren't for people like him. Maybe not for her, either. He needed a public hospital. He faintly recalled a name his mother once mentioned. Somewhere across the city. He needed transport. He spotted a rickshaw puller at the corner. His heart sank. This would cost money. A lot of it. The King's meal. Maybe a whole week of King's meals. For a second he hesitated, then looked back at the moaning woman. There was no choice. He pulled the wallet out. For the first time, he used money not for himself. He ran to the rickshaw puller, fanning out a handful of bills. "Shishu Biwan Hospital," he panted. "Quick, a woman is giving birth." The man eyed him skeptically, then looked at the cash. His gaze shifted. He nodded. Together, they lifted her onto the rickshaw. She was too weak to stand. Finally, she lay curled up in pain. The rickshaw man grabbed the handles, and the journey began. It was a race through the fevered heart of the city. Honking, yelling, clanging trams. Kael sat on the edge, one hand gripping the woman, the other holding the rickshaw frame. Food stalls blurred by. The scent of samosas and hot jalebi filled the air. But hunger was gone. Kael looked at the rickshaw man's back. Sweat-soaked, muscles straining beneath sun-darkened skin. He was hauling 3 lives, his own, hers, and the one yet to be born. All paid for with the stolen wallet. The irony wasn't lost on Kael. The woman groaned again, pain crashing in waves. She clutched Kael's arm, nails digging into him. I can't take it anymore," she cried. "Just keep going." Kael shouted to the rickshaw man. "Faster." At last, they reached the hospital. A crumbling, crowded, noisy building. Nothing like the quiet, luxurious facade of Bellevue. This was a place for the poor. A place where hope and despair jostled for space. Kael shouted for a doctor. A few nurses rushed out, wheeling the woman inside on a stretcher. But when Kael tried to follow, an older nurse blocked his way. "Where's the deposit?" she asked, her voice flat. 500 rupees. That's the rule." Kael froze. He had given most of his money to the rickshaw puller. He opened his wallet. Less than 100 rupees left. I don't have enough," he stammered. The nurse shook her head. "No deposit, no admission. Move along." Desperate, he looked after the woman being wheeled away. He couldn't stop here. Suddenly, his hand reached for his neck. The silver locket, his mother's, the only keepsake he had. It wasn't worth much in money, but to him, it was priceless. No time to think. He burst out of the hospital. Sprinting through the streets, he knew a pawn shop not far from there. He stood at the counter, panting, and pulled the pendant from his neck. "This," he said, "I need money." The pawnbroker gave it a glance, then tossed a few crumpled notes on the counter, a pittance. Kael didn't argue. He grabbed the money and ran back to the hospital, his heart breaking. Not for the money, but for the piece of memory he had just given up. He slammed the money down. "Here, it's enough." The nurse looked surprised, then nodded and started filling out the paperwork. Kael leaned against the wall, drained. He had done all he could. A while later, the woman, her name was Ilara, was taken to the delivery room. As she passed, she saw Kael. She couldn't speak, but she reached a hand toward him. Her eyes said everything: gratitude, fear, and a silent promise. The delivery room doors closed. Kael stood alone in the hallway, empty-handed, hungry, the silver pendant gone. Yet strangely, he didn't feel loss. He felt peace. A likeness no money could buy. He didn't wait to be thanked. He didn't need to know the outcome. He had done what he could. Silently, he turned away, left the hospital, and disappeared into the night streets of Kolkata, returning to the life of someone who had nothing. Time in Kolkata doesn't flow in straight lines. It moves like a river, rushing through monsoons that wash everything away, or drifting lazily under summer heat. As if frozen in time, it wears down memories, fades pain, and changes people in ways you can't see. 10 years had passed since that night in the alley. 10 years, a blink to the steel frame of the Howrah Bridge, but an ocean to a human life. Kael was now a man, no longer the scrappy street kid with sharp, restless eyes. He was taller, broader. His boyish features had vanished. Life had remained harsh, like a cruel stepmother. But he had learned to live with it. His one-kind act hadn't brought him a miracle. No one came searching with a reward. No doors magically opened. The king's feast he gave up that night remained a distant dream. He was still poor. He lived by the strength of his own hands. By day, he worked the docks at Prinsep Ghat, hauling goods onto large boats. By evening, he rowed small wooden boats, ferrying tourists out onto the Hooghly River to watch the sun set behind the bridges. His hands were calloused, rough as bark. His back bore fresh scars from countless scrapes and street fights. Meals were inconsistent. Some days, he ate his fill. Other days, he survived on a crust of bread and river water. But something inside him had changed forever. Something invisible to the eye. He no longer stole. He no longer looked at others with mistrust and calculation. That night, in the alley, he had sold his mother's locket, the only thing connecting him to his past. But in return, he had gained something far more valuable: a moral anchor. The memory of the desperate woman and his own sacrifice kept him from being dragged under by life's current. He became quieter, more withdrawn, but a quiet goodness radiated from within. Meanwhile, in a world thousands of kilometers away, Ilara's river of fate had taken a very different turn. That night, in the rundown government hospital, amid screams and scarcity, she had given birth to a healthy baby boy. With her last ounce of strength, she looked into his tiny, wrinkled face and named him Akash, the sky, because in her darkest moment, he was her sky. After recovering, she did something she had sworn never to do. She called her father, a powerful businessman in Delhi. He had disowned her when she ran away with Rohan, a struggling artist her family never accepted. Rohan, the man she had loved with all her heart, had left her the moment he found out she was pregnant. The sound of his grandson's cries over the phone melted his stone heart. He flew to Kolkata immediately. He forgave his stubborn daughter. Ilara and Akash were brought back into a world of wealth. Back to silk dresses, grand dinners, and overseas vacations. But her soul never truly left that dirty alley in Kolkata. The guilt of never being able to thank the street boy who saved her and her son became a scar that never healed. She tried to find him after being discharged, but he had vanished without a trace. To repay that debt of gratitude, she founded a charity in her son's name, the Akash Foundation. Its mission was to help Kolkata's street children, providing food, shelter, and most importantly, education. It was how she repaid life, but deep down, it was also a desperate search. On every trip to Kolkata, she walked through the alleys, peering at the faces of scrawny boys picking through trash, searching for the eyes of her savior. But Kolkata held thousands of such children. Her boy had dissolved into the city like a grain of sand in the desert. She didn't know his name. She only remembered the clarity in his eyes and the decisiveness of his action. Two rivers, born from the same alley, now ran parallel. One flowed through the shadows of poverty and oblivion, the other through the light of wealth and quiet guilt. They seemed destined never to meet again. They belonged to two different worlds. But the river of time holds curves no one sees coming, and it was quietly preparing a reunion, not with a storm, but with a single ripple from the past, on a day neither of them could have foreseen. 10 years is a long time, long enough for a boy to become a man, long enough for a newborn to become a spirited child, and long enough for a debt of gratitude to become part of one's soul. On an October afternoon, after the monsoons had passed and the skies over Kolkata had cleared, the two rivers of fate began to drift toward each other. The Akash Foundation was hosting its annual festival for street children, right there at Princep Ghat, the very place where Kael worked every day. Elara, as always, was present. She didn't just give a speech. She rolled up her sleeves, served porridge, handed out bread, and spoke with the children. To her, this wasn't just charity. It was a search. Kael was there too. He hadn't come for the free food. His pride wouldn't let him. He simply stood at a distance, leaning against his boat, watching. He looked at the children, versions of himself from a decade ago, and something stirred inside him. He saw the elegant woman moving through the crowd, never knowing she was the one who had changed his life. Amid all the noise, Akash Elara's son felt a little overwhelmed. Used to wide-open spaces, the 10-year-old slipped away from his mother and wandered to the riverbank. He wanted a closer look at the boats drifting by. He stepped down the worn stone steps, unaware they were still slippery from the night's rain. He leaned forward, trying to grab a heart-shaped leaf gliding on the water's surface, and then, in an instant, disaster struck. His foot slipped on the mossy stone. With a sharp cry, Akash lost his balance and plunged into the murky waters of the Hooghly River. His scream tore through the festive air. Elara turned sharply, her heart stopping, where her son had just stood. There was now only empty space. Panic spread. People shouted and pointed, but no one dared to jump in. The current was strong, and not everyone could swim. Akash thrashed, pulled farther out by the river's grip. But Kael had seen everything. From where he stood, he was the closest. There was no time to think. He didn't know whose child it was. All he saw was a child in danger. Instinct, honed by 15 years of survival along the river, kicked in. Without a second thought, he threw off his shirt and dove into the water like an arrow. He was a strong swimmer, a survival skill the river had taught him. His strokes were firm, determined, pushing through the current. Elara, watching from the shore, could only clasp her hands in prayer. She watched the unknown young man fight the current to save her entire world. Finally, Kael caught Akash's arm. The terrified boy clung tightly to him, making it even harder to move. "Don't be scared. Hold on," Kael shouted, trying to calm him. He used every last ounce of strength to swim back with Akash in tow. But just as they neared the shore, Kael's head struck a floating piece of driftwood. A hard blow. Kael's vision dimmed. With the last of his strength, he pushed Akash toward the hands reaching from the shore. The boy was pulled to safety, but Kael, the nameless hero, was spent. His body went limp and slowly sank into the murky waters. "Where is he?" Elara screamed, holding her son tight after making sure he was safe. "Where's the man who saved my child?" People looked at each other, then out at the empty river. The joy of saving a boy was quickly replaced with dread. The man who had saved him was gone. Elara felt her world collapse a second time. She pulled every string she had. She called the most powerful people she knew. Rescue boats arrived within minutes. Elara refused to leave. She stood at the water's edge, Akash trembling in her arms. She had to find that young man. She owed him not just one, but 2 lives. Hours later, as twilight settled over the river, one of the boats found Kael. He had drifted into a thicket downriver, unconscious, covered in scrapes and with a deep gash on his forehead. He was still breathing, but barely. He was rushed to the city's finest hospital, under Elara's direct orders. Elara rushed to the hospital. She had to be there when he woke up. She needed to know his name. She needed to thank him. When she stepped into the hospital room, the young man was lying on the bed, nurses tending to him. He was still unconscious. Elara walked closer. She looked at his face. So different after 10 years, pale and bruised. But those eyes, even closed. The curve of those brows, the shape of those lips. Something about him felt heartbreakingly familiar. Then, her eyes fell to his wrist. A faint scar circular, in the exact spot where someone might have worn something for years. Elara's heart stopped. She raised a trembling hand to her mouth, tears welling up. Could it be? Was he the boy from that alley, her nameless savior? In the quiet, sterile hospital room, only the steady beep of the heart monitor filled the air. To Elara, it was the sweetest music she'd ever heard. It was proof that the young man was still fighting, that he was still alive. She stayed by his bedside, never leaving. She studied his face, trying to stitch together fragments of memory. The skinny boy from years ago and this strong young man. Could they be the same? Or was this just a heart burdened by debt? Desperate for closure. She needed answers. She needed him to wake up. Two days passed like a century. Elara never left his side, barely sleeping. Doctors said he was out of danger, but still unconscious from the head injury. She told her son about the man who had saved his life. Akash sat quietly outside, drawing pictures of a man swimming through a river. On the third morning, as the first rays of sunlight warmed the room, a miracle. Kael's eyelids fluttered. His fingers switched. Elara, dozing at his side, woke with a jolt. She held her breath. Kael opened his eyes. Everything was blurry. His body ached. The smell of antiseptic stung his nose. This wasn't the docks. This wasn't the bridge he slept under. He saw a well-dressed woman sitting beside him, tears in her eyes, staring. He didn't recognize her. "The boy," he croaked, voice rough. "The boy, is he okay?" His first words weren't about himself, but the child he saved. Illyra's heart broke. She nodded over and over, tears falling freely. "He's fine. My son is fine because of you," she whispered. "You saved him. You saved my whole world." She looked deep into his eyes and asked the question that had haunted her for a decade. 10 years ago, was it you? In the alley behind Bellevue Hospital, were you the one who carried me there? Kael looked at her, now looking closely. Those eyes. Those same desperate eyes from the alley that night. The pregnant woman. It couldn't be. He was stunned, speechless. He only managed a weak nod. Illyra cried, not from sorrow, but from release. The debt that had haunted her for 10 years had finally found a face. "I looked for you," she sobbed. "I searched everywhere." The circle of fate had finally closed, not by coincidence, but by a second act of heroism. In the days that followed, Kael recovered quickly under the best care. Illyra and Akash visited him daily. Akash, no longer shy, brought him drawings, told him stories about school. For the first time, Kael felt the warmth of family. But as his discharge day approached, fear crept back in. Where would he go? Back to the docks? Back under the bridge? The life he lived in the hospital felt like a fleeting dream. Reality loomed. Illyra walked in and saw the worry in his eyes. She didn't hand him money. She knew that would hurt his pride. She offered something else. "I can't repay what you did for me and Akash," she said. "But I can offer you a chance." She handed him a file. "Our foundation is opening a new center right here at Princep Ghat. A shelter, a school, a training workshop for kids like you once were. But I need someone to lead it. Someone with more than just a resume, someone with heart. Someone who understands them. No one fits better than you, Kael." Kael looked at her, then at the folder. It wasn't just a job. It was a purpose. A path to transform his bitter years into hope for others. The act of sacrifice he once made had now saved not just 2 lives, but a whole generation of street children. Together, they look out over the Hooghly River, the river that carried away pain and brought back purpose. It had witnessed despair, sacrifice, and now a convergence, where rivers met and became an ocean of compassion. Kindness isn't always repaid with money, but it is always repaid with redemption. The story of Kael and Illyra isn't a fairy tale. There are no miracles, no magical coincidences falling from the sky. It's a story about currents, the currents of fate, and the currents of kindness. That night, in a dark alley, Kael gave up a meal fit for a king. He sold the last memory of his mother. And he didn't get anything in return, not right away. His life remained harsh. The river kept sweeping away his days of hunger. But that act of kindness, like a seed dropped into dry soil, didn't die. It took root quietly in his own soul, becoming a moral anchor that kept him from drifting too far. And elsewhere, it bloomed in Illyra's heart, becoming the inspiration for something greater. This story reminds us of a simple truth. Kindness is not a transaction. It's not an investment waiting for return. Kindness is a river. When you give it, you don't lose it. You simply set it flowing, and it may reach faraway places, nourishing lives you may never see. Right now, maybe you're not a billionaire. Maybe you don't have the power to change the world. But you always have something to give. A kind word to someone struggling. A small favor for a stranger. A forgiveness you've been holding back. Never underestimate the power of those actions. Because you never know, the river of kindness you set in motion today may one day find its way back to you when you need it most. If this story touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Be part of the current. Like this video, comment with your thoughts, and most of all, share it with someone who could use a little hope today. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel to hear more stories that just might change your life. Thank you for listening, and see you in the next video.